An important topic surrounding the story of Rent is the homeless community. Issues like poverty, gentrification, and drug use crop up quite a bit in the story, and so I'm going to take a bit of time to delve into them. Homelessness in New York City has been a massive issue since the Great Depression, which began in 1929. There were some efforts to combat it. For example, the government created housing intended to help those less fortunate. Unfortunately, many of these units did not actually serve the homeless population, and by the 1970s they began to disappear. Instead of finding help and resources, the homeless community often faced discrimination and criminalization. One contributing factor to the problem of homelessness is gentrification, a process of refining an area to make it more socially acceptable. This may look like renovation or demolition of old buildings and other steps to make a neighborhood or area more appealing to those moving in. But this can have devastating effects on those who live in these areas. As the property value of a particular area goes up, so do rent prices, and these areas can become completely inaccessible to those who once made their lives there. Rent is set in the East Village of New York City in the early 1990s. In the decade before that, gentrification began in this area. As rich businessmen began to invest in the East Village, rent prices soared, and the culture of the East Village began to change. The East Village was home to Tompkins Square Park, which at one time became a de facto homeless shelter for over 150 unhoused individuals. The area was notorious for the people who lived there, as well as for drug use and late-night parties. In 1988, the New York City Parks Department imposed a 1 a.m. curfew on the park, which had once been open 24 hours. This threatened the lives of those living in the park. Where were they supposed to go? On August 6th, hundreds gathered in protest. While some of the protesters were aggressive, the police that arrived on the scene were ruthless. Police officers were caught on camera beating people, including random bystanders. Everyone agreed that the NYPD mishandled the situation, and yet no one was held accountable. Another issue that crops up in Rent is that of drug addiction. Addiction is defined as a chronic, relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. This was a massive issue in NYC during the time of Rent, which takes place near the beginning of the opioid epidemic and in the midst of immense crack and heroin usage. Addiction is a brain disorder, but it has often been handled merely as a crime, and many who struggled found themselves criminalized rather than treated. Though rehabilitation centers did exist, they were pricey and therefore inaccessible to many of those who would have benefited from them. So what does all of this have to do with Rent? These issues are woven throughout Jonathan Larson's story. Some of his characters experience homelessness or poverty. Some protest the conditions and decisions that contribute to the issue. There's one character who is a drug addict, and the show takes place in the East Village in New York City, an epicenter for some of these issues. To better understand how these topics come together in Rent, see for yourself. Our production opens in April. We hope to see you there.